It's currently Friday the 13th when I'm filming this, so, you know, you gotta represent. I kind of feel like a dad that belongs at like a cookout or like a luau. Hello, so I have a super fun video for the fall. So I have a bunch of horror book recommendations, and how I'm doing this is I'm taking a bunch of horror subgenres or tropes, and then I'm picking one book from each that I think is like my favorite of that specific trope. So some of these, listen, don't get technical in the comments, okay? Because some of these could fit into each other. Like, some of them are tropes within tropes or subgenres within subgenres. And listen, I'm just giving you some horror book recommendations in a fun and different way, okay? So since today is Friday the 13th, let's start with slasher. You're probably not watching this for like another 2 weeks, but that's okay. So we'll start with slashers. My favorite slasher, I actually hate slasher books. I like slasher movies. I think they're fun, whatever. Slasher books I'm not a huge fan of, but the one that I really like that worked for me is extreme horror. So this is like extreme graphic violence, okay? But it is Night of the Prowler by John Athen. This is about a serial killer who is on the loose, and there's this girl who's working at a convenience store, and she's doing the night shift by herself while the serial killer is on the loose. So we're getting chapters from her in the convenience store, and it was so anxiety inducing, so terrifying. And then we're alternating chapters where we get the killings that the serial killer is doing. And he's killing people in very graphic, gruesome, disgusting ways because it's extreme horror. Love John Athen's writing. I think he is a perfect example of an extreme horror author that just like writes really well. I love his books. And this one genuinely scared me because I could put myself in that character's shoes and I was horrified. Like, I would have quit my job on the spot. So, yeah. Next is supernatural, so things that cannot be explained with science. This can be, you know, paranormal, this could be aliens, this could be monsters, etc. I'm gonna go with Nestlings by Nat Cassidy for this one. I am not a huge supernatural reader. Chompy, my dog, what are you doing? You chomping? You chomping? What are you doing? She's trying to like run in this tiny little office. So yeah, I am not a huge supernatural person. I don't know, I like my horror a little more realistic, but this one was so freaking well done. I absolutely loved this one. This one is about this couple. They are married, they move into this like affordable apartment, house, building, and they're living there with their baby, and they notice that something is not quite right. The wife in particular is like, there's something not right here, we need to move out of here, and like no one is believing her. There are teeth marks on the baby. It very much resembles, it's like a mix between Rosemary's Baby and Salem's Lot is how it's marketed, and I would agree with that. It just gets progressively crazier and creepier and more weird, but I just love Nat Cassidy's writing. This one is one of my all-time favorite horror books, and it was one of my all-time favorite books that I read last year, so I highly recommend this one if you haven't read this one already. Also, the afterword of this one like actually made me cry. It was so heartfelt and beautiful and sad, and oh my god, I love this man. And I know I just mentioned monsters could be included in this category, but I further broke this one down, and in the monster category, I wanted to recommend The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix, because I just could not pick between the two of these books, and I freaking love Grady Hendrix so much. I love his writing. He's one of my favorite horror authors. I don't care if that's basic bitch of me. I love him so much, and specifically this one is my favorite one. So this one, we are following this woman who believes her neighbor is a vampire. So she's in this book club and she's trying to tell everyone, hey, I think the neighbor across the street's a vampire, and everyone is gaslighting her husband is gaslighting her, and she's like, no, he's a vampire, and no one is believing her. It is like horror comedy, but at the same time has some like pretty graphic and wild scenes in there. I love this take on a vampire book that isn't like your typical vampire book that you would see everywhere else. I do think it has like a fun twist, a fun spin on it, and I was just fully invested in this book. I needed to know what was happening. Honestly, I think the gaslighting that went on in this book was more terrifying than the actual like vampire plot, but I just love the way that Grady Hendrix writes his characters, and this one was just so well done. I just had to put it in somewhere. Next is Creature Features, and for this one I picked Near the Bone by Christina Henry. I love this one so much because I love what the creature actually resembled. So we're following this husband and wife that is, they're living in the woods in like this cabin, and it's super isolated, you know, it's completely snowed in, and this woman is horribly abused by her husband. He is just the biggest piece of shit. He is just horribly, like, verbally, sexually, mentally, physically abusive to this poor woman. And, you know, one day these people show up outside, and she's like, oh my god, there are people here, and they are trying to track down this creature that apparently lives in the woods there, the mountains, or wherever they are. And I love what this creature resembled, and I just love the overall message and plot that was happening involving the husband. Just the commentary about abuse in this one was just so well done. I absolutely love this book. Then getting into psychological horror, I'm gonna go with Rosemary's Baby for this one. This is one of the first like horror movies that I saw and that I loved, and then I read the book, and this just has a special place in my heart. So if you don't know, this is about a husband and wife that move into this apartment, and something weird's going on with the neighbors. Everyone's acting very strange, and the wife is like, no, there's something going on with the neighbors. Like, there's just something not right going on around here. And she's pregnant, and no one is believing her. They're gaslighting her. They're giving her a bunch of weird shit to take and drink, and she just isn't sure who to trust. And I just love this slow burn psychological horror that just really blows up and like gets in your face at the end. This one just has a special place in my heart. What are you doing back there? My dog literally just walked over to me and like gave me this Squishmallow. She just handed this to me. Next is survival horror, and for this one I'm gonna go with The Troop by Nick Cutter. So this one is about a troop of Boy Scouts. They are staying in the woods with their scout leader, master, whoever. I don't know what you call them. The scout leader, I guess. And they come across an emaciated man, and everyone's like, don't go near him, don't go near him. Well, next thing you know, something happens, and they are now without their scout leader, and this Boy Scout troop has to try to survive in the woods with whatever is going on, okay? This one is very disturbing for multiple reasons. There's a lot of body horror. There is some animal cruelty that you can skip. I know a lot of people actually have it listed online where it's at. But yeah, just the way that some of these boys think and their thought process is pretty terrifying. And yeah, this book is very well written and just overall disgusting. Talk about horror comedy. So I can argue that any Grady Hendrix book would fit this category, but since I love him so much and I can't shut up about him, I'm gonna go with my favorite satirical horror book, and that is American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis, one of my favorite books of all time. This is one of the books that literally made me who I am as a person. So of course we're following Patrick Bateman. Of course he is a psycho. So he is trying to blend in with society, and the way that he does that is through material items, and he's very materialistic, and he becomes obsessed with, you know, designer brands and different musicians and things where he will obsess over these things so that way he can blend in like on a surface level with average human beings. This book is disgusting, it is graphic, but at the same time, I think this is the funniest book that I have ever read. I have never laughed out loud more in my entire life than I have reading this book. I've read it twice now, and both times I was hysterically cracking up at some of the things that he says and some of the things that he thinks. It's like genuinely terrifying that this man is thinking like this, because you're like, wow, he's really losing it. Like, he's really trying so hard to fit in, but just the witty, sarcastic remarks in this book are gold. Let's talk about haunted house books. This could fit into like the supernatural, paranormal category, but I further broke it down. And I am not a big fan of the haunted house trope, but the one book that I did really love is How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix again. So we're following this sister and brother who their parents just died, so they move in, or they don't move in, so they go back to their parents' house to try to fix it up to sell it. But her mom, I believe her mom, was obsessed with collecting puppets that may or may not be haunted. So you're following this like cheesy haunted house trope, but it followed so much commentary about grief and, you know, how you feel after the death of a parent, and then all of the legal shit that you have to deal with, and the stress on top of dealing with the stress just from grieving in itself. And I just absolutely loved this one. I loved like the whole family aspect to this one, but I do think the haunted puppets in this book were hilarious. I don't know what that says about me. Another horror subgenre that is not my favorite is folk horror. I haven't read too many folk horror books because they just don't interest me, if I'm being completely honest. So for this one, I am going to say Slewfoot by Brom. So this is about this woman named Abatha who her husband passes away, and she ends up widowed in this Puritan colony under the patriarchy. And then this like spirit Slewfoot arrives, and she's not sure what he is, who he is, if he's good or evil, and there's like this witchy aspect going on. If I'm being completely honest, my memory is not up to par for this one, but I do remember overall liking it, and I do think that this would be a perfect read for the Halloween season because, like I said, it does have that witchy vibe to it, but it is something that you have to be in the mood for. Like, you have to be in the mood for a folk horror book in order to read Brom a majority of the time, in my opinion anyways. Talk about gothic horror. So gothic horror is like slow burn, atmospheric. For this one, I'm going to say Ein Hollow by Tim McGregor. I love this book so much. This is a Frankenstein retelling where this woman, you know, lives with her family on this like island where only 20 people live or something like that. And then this man mysteriously shows up, and everyone's like, who is this guy? Why is he here? Why is he visiting here? What are his motives? And here that man is Victor Frankenstein, and something then happens where our main character, you know, starts to kind of fall in love with Victor Frankenstein, and it kind of takes this turn and this spin that the original Frankenstein does not have, and it gets very bleak and depressing and just like, girl, what the hell? I ended up loving where this went because I love bleak and depressing books. So if that sounds up your alley, I highly recommend this one, and it was very, very well written. Religious horror. Let's talk about Boys in the Valley by Philip Fracassi. So this is about an orphanage where a bunch of boys live, and one day someone knocks on the door and they're like, hey, if there's a blizzard outside, this man is dying, can he basically come in here and die? And he has like occult symbols carved all over him. They're like, what the hell is going on with this guy? And he dies there. And when he does, something happens and the boys are not quite right. They're picking sides, they're fighting with each other, there's deaths that are happening, and it just like explores this religious atmosphere, and I think that this was so good. I know a lot of people love this book, a lot of people don't really like this book as much, but this just really worked for me. This story sucked me in. Let's talk about possession. Now, possession or like exorcisms or demonic, this could fit into the supernatural, paranormal category. It could fit into religious, you know, I mean, a lot of these you're blurring the lines a little bit, but I broke this one down further because again, I have another Grady Hendrix book to recommend you. I am not a stalker. I am not obsessive, I swear to God. But this is My Best Friend's Exorcism. I absolutely love this book so much. We're following these two best friends in high school, and one is like not acting quite right, and the other one thinks that she might be possessed by a demon, and she thinks that she might have to do an exorcism. So that is this book. I just loved the like 80s vibes, the best friends. Like, it's just kind of like a light-hearted horror book. And I just really ended up getting so sucked in and invested to this one. I just thought it was a lot of fun. Serial killers. So books that are involving serial killers. I'm gonna go with Mary by Nat Cassidy, another Nat Cassidy book. But this one, we're following this woman, Mary. She is starting to get hot flashes. She thinks that she's going through menopause. She's going to doctors. They can't figure out what's wrong with her. And then she starts hearing the voices of someone who was a serial killer. She thinks that it was the serial killer talking to her in her mind. Yeah, this book is weird. It's wild. There are tons of different themes. Like, this is another one that could fit into like a million categories because there was a little bit too much going on with like some of the themes and twists and turns, and it was a wild one. Extremely well written. Absolutely loved the main character, Mary. I just thought this one was another one that was a lot of fun, and I really just love Nat Cassidy's commentary on like womanhood and being a woman. And he's like, hey, I know I'm a man that doesn't know what any of this feels like. I don't know what it's like to go through menopause, but like, here's why I wrote it. And his little author's notes just really solidify that I think he's such a great author, and I see what he's trying to do with his books. So I really ended up appreciating this one, and I actually think about it all the time. And I really want to reread this one. I really just love following her kind of like downward descent into madness. And that's just something that will always work for me. There's nothing I love more than reading about unhinged women descending into madness. Next is apocalyptic. I'm not a huge like post-apocalyptic book reader. I don't know, it has to be a special kind of book to really get me invested. And for this one, my answer is actually going to shock you because if you know me, I really don't like this author's books, but I'm gonna go with The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay. Yeah, I know. This is probably the only Paul Tremblay book that I loved. This is about two men and their daughter who are staying at a remote cabin, and their daughter goes outside to like collect grasshoppers or whatever, and there's a man that comes up to her and he's like, hey, your parents have to let us in. And then three more strangers show up and they're all like, yeah, you guys have to let us in, we're sorry, this isn't your fault, but like, we need your help to save the world. So it's just this weird, creepy book where a lot of it is ambiguous. You don't know what the hell is going on. You're like, is this actually the end of the world? Are they just lying? Are they just like sadistic serial killers, or like what is the motive here, or is the world actually ending? I just really liked this one. I kept reading to see where this was gonna go. It sucked me in. It's not everyone's cup of tea, and Paul Tremblay is not everyone's cup of tea because he's not mine, but I ended up really enjoying this book when I read it. I think if you like ambiguous books, you would like this one, but if you're someone that you need answers, I would stay away from this one. Next is cozy horror. So this is like Rachel Harrison, you know, like cutesy horror that's like not really horror. It's like more literary fiction or contemporary, following, you know, a woman's life, and then there's like a slight little horror trope to it, like a witch or something cutesy, okay? This one, I'm gonna say Suburban Hell by Maureen Kilmer. This is about these like suburban moms, you know, they're like hanging out, drinking mimosas, going to the PTA meetings together. I think the one woman like builds a she shed or something where she goes to hang out, and she starts acting really weird. It kind of gives me that Grady Hendrix, My Best Friend's Exorcism vibe, where it's like the best friends and then one starts acting weird, and then the other women think that she is possessed by a demon and they don't know what to do. They don't know if they're gonna have to like give her an exorcism or what is going on. But I just thought that this one, I really liked the overall story that was going on, you know, with just like the moms and their drama and their, you know, their family drama and whatever, the neighborhood drama. But then you're getting this like cute like horror twist on it. I just really like this one. I just thought that this was just like a fun, easy popcorn sort of read. Next is grief horror. So this one I'm going to say Crossroads by Laurel Hightower. This is about a grieving mother whose son passes away, and she goes to visit his gravesite, and one day she has a cut on her finger and she like bleeds a little bit into his gravesite, and she thinks that she is seeing him again. She can feel his presence. She feels like that's him in the house, and she is obsessed with trying to bring him back now. It is heartbreaking. It's devastating. It's so sad. And I think that this just explored grief and trauma so well, and just the lengths that people are willing to go to like believe in something, and how people come up with beliefs in order to almost like feel better about their situation. Like you always want to believe that you're going to see your loved one again. And I just think that this one was just so heartbreaking and so sad. But yeah, especially if you've dealt with the death of a loved one or a child, like this one is definitely going to really, really hit close to home. Last but not least, let's talk about dystopian books. For this one, I'm gonna have to say Tender as the Flesh by Augustina Bazterrica. So we are following a world where animal meat is poisonous, and so there are humans being factory farmed for meat and literally, you know, living in a farm as if they're cattle. And then our main character is working on this farm. It is bleak, it is disturbing, it's disgusting, it's bleak, it's depressing. Just the things that go on this farm, how these people are treated, and then not only that, but just like thinking about how animals are treated. I think this had a lot to say about consumerism and capitalism. I mean, this one was just so fucked up to me because it almost felt realistic. And I know a lot of people are like, well, I don't get the hype with this one because it felt real. Well, that's why it scared me, because it literally felt real, okay? And just how these people had just zero regard for other human beings. Like this book was very, very bleak, extremely well written. I can't rave about this one enough. It's one of my favorite books of all time. But yeah, that is it. Those were my horror book recommendations. Let me know if you've read any in the comments down below, and also let me know what some of your favorite horror books are, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!